Hi everyone, and welcome back to week 11 on social media. In this video we're going to focus on the idea of consumption and social media. I think you are well versed now in ideas around consumption, but we'll be applying these specifically through to social media and seeing at what points it intersects with all of these different lenses that we've looked at. So first I will ask you to visit the YouTube playlist and check out the 5th video on the list, Are You Addicted to Social Media? And check it out. You don't have to watch the whole thing, maybe about 3 minutes. And what I think you'll find is that it is a somewhat silly take, but it is an example of internet production for YouTube, which is a form of social media, focusing on what social media is and social media, so-called addiction. I particularly would encourage you to think about your own consumption. Now, we looked at this somewhat last week in terms of platforms, so we talked in the workshops about how many hours, for example, you spent looking at screens and accessing your phones and so forth. But I will be interested to see in a little bit more detail the level of social media consumption. So the thing about social media is that the consumption goes two ways. We are all, well, I imagine most of us, if not all of us, consumers of social media of one kind or another. But social media is also a key promoter of consumption. And the shift from newspapers to social media in terms of advertising that I talked about in the previous video is precisely because social media has a great power to act as an advertising force and to encourage people to purchase things. So advertising, obviously a big issue, and we'll also touch on in the following video on the idea of social media celebrities, and we'll go into that in more detail in the workshop as well. So this can be seen again in terms of what percentage of total media time is spent on social media. This is from the Nielsen company, so it is a reputable source for statistics. But you can see that the demographic tends to skew female, and I suspect that, I'm not sure exactly who they were interviewing, but I suspect, based on what you guys were telling me last week, that you would consume significantly more social media per week than, say, 26 hours a week. So I will be interested to see whether or not that is the case. And we there have to also think about patterns of consumption. Is sitting down and going on Facebook or whatever for an hour, is that a different kind of consumption than checking your phone constantly all day? So I guess there's those two factors. But as you can see here, this is still quite, considering the number of media and entertainment options we have, the percentage of time overall that is spent on media that is social media is actually quite huge. As I was saying, especially considering that there's all these different options that we have. And this is obviously, as you can see in the final pie graphs, an enormous increase from even 2015. And so the rate of growth seems to suggest that it's not going to be slowing down anytime soon. This is perhaps not quite as reliable a source, but I did check some of the figures, and it seems to be correct, but I would double check anything from here. But it puts it together quite nicely in a section. So obviously not everything is in here, but it's an interesting comparison of the different number of users, and you will note the use of the term active users to distinguish from the many people who have defunct accounts and thus cannot really be counted as users, even though they have an account but they don't interact with it. So in terms of consumption, each of these different forms seem to encourage different kinds of consumption. So you'll see for Pinterest, for example, it's a heavily female demographic. It includes a lot of things, as you can see, of recipes and fashion, and anyone who's on Pinterest knows that there are many of these things. And thus the things are more about, renovation projects and buying things and shoes and all these sorts of things, more so than perhaps something like Twitter that also uses advertising and has a lot of advertising sort of embedded into it in subtle ways, but cannot sort of frame it in such an explicit way that it is sort of an integral part of the platform, is that you're sharing products. It's sort of about the products and about, recipes and making things and stuff. But the products play a huge role there. So in terms of the structure of these different platforms, so here we're moving into that idea of structure and convergence and sort of how platforms help shape what kinds of narratives you can have. So we're linking into that as well. How does it help shape what can and can't be done? So obviously you are going to be doing slightly different things on LinkedIn than you are on Instagram, or I would think so. But I guess the idea is, how many characters you have available. Can you use images? Can you use videos? What are other people doing is important as well. So if you are doing, and I think we mentioned this last week, if you're doing a video on YouTube and you want to get a lot of hits, you'll think about what is it that happens on YouTube that gets a lot of hits. So in a way, you're sort of, it's not a genre, but you're sort of moving for a certain set of norms. So if you look at the list of the top 10 Instagram posts from last year in turn, Selena Gomez has 8 of them, and Ronaldo has 1 or maybe 2, and then there's one other. So what does that say then? Does that say that this is a sort of participatory form, or does it say that those who already have a level of fame are always going to win out and get the most attention? And how do you break into, when you've got lots and lots of people like that, how do you break into getting that media attention there? In terms of using social media influencers, which certainly not all of them are Selena Gomez. There are certainly people who have built a reputation on the various social media platforms, and some who have actually made quite a bit of money out of doing so. And we'll talk about that in the next video when I talk about Cameron Dallas and MagCon, which you may or may not be familiar with. So certainly a lot of this has to do with consumption. So there's a lot of, say, I know this because of having a young child, there is a lot of unboxing of toys on YouTube with millions and millions and millions of hits, where parents are given by companies various toys so that they can unwrap them and the child can play with them, and then there can be a YouTube video about it. There are many equivalent things that I could mention in that respect. So there are lots of different opportunities to use influence in these spheres to encourage consumption of particular brands. So that the top one of those Selena Gomez posts was her posing with a Coke from a Coca-Cola ad. So you can see that the brands aren't sort of far away. I'd like you to watch this video that talks about how a particular social media strategy was used with an influencer to promote the launch of Netflix in Australia. And this is made by the company that organised it, so keep in mind that the location of that sourcing and the potential influences on the video itself. All right, so thank you for that. I will see you in the next video about convincing social media, and then I will see you in the workshops. Okay.